Our conversation today is about the bright side, because despite the challenges, and there have been many, we all have something to be grateful for, particularly when it comes to the arts and creative spaces. So we're taking a minute to create a space to relish the silver lining. Thank you to our partners at the Kimball Art Museum for making this conversation possible. Now, before we meet our guest today, I asked a few North Texas artists ahead of the panel what the past year has brought them. Let's take a listen.
My name is Jess Garland. I am a musician and founder of a nonprofit music education program called Swan Strings. The past year has brought me growth and transformation as an artist and in leadership.
My name is Sarah Ayala, and I'm an artist. This past year has brought me a whole new love for reading. I've rediscovered my interest in Greek and Roman mythology, which has been a much-needed escape, and I've mused often on how the classics in general are told through the voices and opinions of men. I hope to bring this ancient and current issue into my art.
My name is Desiree Venecia. I'm an artist and educator. The past year has brought me opportunities. And when I say opportunities, I mean opportunities as an artist, as an educator, and also as a parent to a little boy. And I'm very grateful for those opportunities.
My name is Molly Sydnor. I am a creative marketer and freelance artist. Silver linings from the last year. For me, I was having major burnout. My artistic practice and that being my hobby as well as my work really had blurred lines. And for a moment there, right before March, I was starting to feel super drained and tired. This last year has really allowed me the privilege of patience and slowing down. It's shown me the importance of being home and making where I live home and having a nice home base. It's given me more time with my family. I switched careers completely. I quit a job that was making me unhappy. I think this last year has been, for me, a blessing in disguise and an opportunity to learn and grow and implement changes in my life from here on out.
Many thanks to Jess, Sarah, Desiree, and Molly for sharing their thoughts with us. Now, let me introduce our panelists. DJ Perera is an artist, primarily a painter. Much of his work revolves around his Sri Lankan heritage. Last year, he became the only Sri Lankan artist to have his work included in Texas Christian University's permanent art collection. DJ also teaches visual fine art at Eastern Hills High School in Fort Worth. And Jeffrey Smith is the founder of the Downtown Cowtown at the ISIS. The historic theater was originally built all the way back in 1914, and Jeffrey has been hard at work bringing it back to life. The venue will be opening soon, and we'll hear more from him about what it took to make that happen. And our third guest is Dana Schultes. She's the executive producer for Stage West Theater, one of North Texas's premier theater companies. Dana oversees all of Stage West's programming and its growth, including a massive effort to renovate the company's 16,000 square foot facility. I'm sure she'll have more to say on that front. Now, we'll get to the silver linings in a moment, but to put the good stuff into perspective, let's touch on the hardships for a minute. What has been your biggest challenge this year in your respective roles? I was thinking we could go in alphabetical order. So Dana, DJ, and then Jeffrey.
Great. Biggest challenge in my industry has essentially, it has to be that our whole industry is shut down. Live theater is, by the nature of what it is, a public gathering, a gathering of artists and public together in one small space to experience a collaborative form of live art. And that is very difficult to do during a pandemic. So that has been the biggest challenge, is finding a way to continue our connection with our community, keep the staff together, and make sure that tomorrow is secure for when it is possible to reopen.
DJ, what about you?
Well, as a AP art educator, I can vividly remember how confusingly chaotic the pandemic was, especially during mid-March and April. And to be suddenly thrust into this remote learning scenario, it really caused a lot of frustration, not just for myself, but for my other AP teaching colleagues, and of course the AP art students. You have to imagine trying to teach complex visual concepts and techniques without the ability to demonstrate them in a traditional physical sense was problematic. And we're talking about the advanced placement portfolios here, right? So you want quality, you want excellence, but to do that remotely, it did cause a lot of frustration. But thankfully, with the pandemic, what's fascinating is it not only tested humanity's resilience and resourcefulness, it also shed a light on a lot of inequities, which we can talk about later. But as an AP art instructor, that was one of my main issues, trying to inspire students to produce excellence.
Jeffrey, what have been some of the biggest challenges for you?
The biggest challenge I'll have to say for us is we went into the first of 2020 with the excitement of being able to bring this building back and have it open within 2020. And when the pandemic hit, it really created a huge effect and impact on the renovation process. So on a construction side, on a renovation side, there were certain things that came to a screeching halt that we had not anticipated. So it sort of elongated our timeline on some of the things that we needed to do to get completed. So that's probably the biggest challenge we had. It's interesting that, we're looking at, you're talking about silver linings, and for us, we were all excited about opening this brand new venue, and it turned into a sense of insanity of trying to open during a pandemic. So it's been a fun journey. It's been a challenging journey. But I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is just dealing with the intricacies of deliverables and getting things here when dealing with a supply line that has come to a screeching halt.
So social distancing really kind of forced all of us to rethink the way that we do things. And Dana, it really pushed theater companies to the limit this past year. Can you tell us a little bit about the creative solutions that Stage West found to keep making work?
Sure. We never stopped creating, and I'm real proud about that. COVID hit North Texas the same weekend that we opened a play called The Children by Lucy Kirkwood. And oddly, the theme, the feel of that play sort of played right along, paralleled with a pandemic rolling into the area. So the theme was interesting, but we couldn't produce it anymore live. So we were one of the first theaters in the nation to be able to move a play onto an online platform. We did that over a couple of weeks, got it online, and moved all of our classes online. We had great success with all of that, but we were not able to create any new material that used the union. The Actors Equity Association put a full moratorium on any work, on March 15th, essentially. So from that point on, we have had to get really creative and think outside of the box on how to perform. And that essentially for us meant nothing that a union member would do. No traditional plays, certainly no work side by side without a mask on. So we looked to doing things online, but also in cars, having a performance in a parking lot with cars all having the sound piped into the FM audio. While the audio itself was pre-recorded, so that the performers who were doing an interpretive performance weren't having to speak to one another, so they were safe. We have done outside performances, and we've also done live streamed performances where the actor's speech was all pre-recorded individually on video and then put on a large screen behind them, so that they could do the performance without having the aerosol spray on one another. So it was always our first priority to never get anyone sick, but it was never an option to not perform. So we've had quite a time of it. And we've also created a podcast for social justice, and essentially done everything we can think of to find ways to reach audiences in new ways.
DJ, your work has also gone through some changes in the past year. Tell us about your creative practice and how it has evolved in the last year.
Yes, so as I mentioned, confusion, chaos, words that could be aptly used to describe my painting style. I typically work with a pouring technique. Resin is one of my primary ingredients. But the pandemic affected everyone's lives, and you were either a group of people that embraced it in the sense that you got time to spend with family. As an artist, especially, it forced you to spend even more time copiously working on your works. And then on the other hand, obviously the darker side, it obviously caused a lot of remorse for a lot of people around the world. But amidst all that, I needed to find a technique that was calming, therapeutic, and would essentially just zone me out and take me away from all the confusion and chaos. And so the stippling technique, pointillism, as it's known, that was something that led me to start creating a 19-part series that focused, again, on my Sri Lankan heritage, specifically wildlife. And right now I'm currently working on my 6th piece, which is currently the largest. And everything in perspective, right? So the something that's this big, pointillism, is quite daunting. But when you have something that is even bigger, double that size, again, just to be consumed in your work, to let the process consume you and take you away from reality, is one of the main reasons why I shifted from the visceral painting technique to the more meticulous and tedious technique of stippling.
If you're just now joining us, we'd love to hear from you. You can drop your questions in the YouTube chat. And if you're on the Art&Seek website, there should be a link to that YouTube page. Now, Jeffrey, I'll turn it over to you. You have spent the last year renovating a historic Fort Worth venue. It's a huge undertaking. Tell us more about why you took on that challenge and what drove you to persevere, to continue through the pandemic.
That's a huge question. The process of doing this, renovating this theater, I mean, it has been a passion pursuit for me. When we started this process, this building has been in the Fort Worth stockyards for as long as I can remember. And as you mentioned, the rich history of this building, it's been here since 1918. And has gone through several renovations through the years, but it's been dormant since 1988. And it just hurt my heart to see this theater just not being loved and taken care of. And when my wife and I actually sat down and talked about, where do we see ourselves? What is it that we want to do? I didn't hesitate. This is where I saw myself. This is what I saw myself being able to do in bringing this beautiful building back to life. So when we started the process, we knew it was going to take some time to do it. And it got very meticulous. I think that DJ pointing out being very meticulous and getting consumed into that process, I think is something that was definitely an outcome for us as well going into this pandemic, because we had to start looking at all of the different pieces of the building. Not only were we working to be historically accurate with this process, but how can we do things that are 21st century that are going to be beneficial for our patrons? The fact that we were doing it during the pandemic, it became one of those conversations of, okay, how can we increase air circulation so that it's cleaner? That's one of the things that we walk through and talk through. I'm sort of taking a little bit of a tangent from where you started this question, but a lot of it has to do with really digging into the importance this, I think this space has to artists, to the community at large. Being able to bring this landmark back was just very, very important to us. I'm very excited that we're on the tail end. We're just like the pandemic in that sense, that we're coming out of the other side of this, and we are at a position where this building is ready to rock and roll. So I'm really excited about that.
I mean, it sounds like many of us, it felt like the world stopped, but the work did not stop, right? We had to find ways to keep moving. And I'm curious to hear from all of you about how do you feel about that aspect of your work, having to find solutions, having to get creative. Do you feel like it lit a fire under you? And are you, since this is about silver linings, are you grateful for that push in a way?
This has been such an interesting experience this whole year, because it has been devastating in so many ways, and all of the people who have lost their lives and their relatives, and we've lost our way of life. But on the other side, there have been so many amazing silver linings to this on a personal level. I have never been so stressed out of all coming from having to figure out what to do next. How do we make it to the next step? Because we don't know anything about what is going to happen next. And it's hard. We didn't used to live like that. It was a fact that we never knew what was going to happen next, but we always sort of relied on, we basically have an idea of what we can expect. And I think for pretty much everyone, the economy was booming, and Stage West was about to have its biggest year in 43 years. And then bam, everything changes. But on the flip side, so you have this massive amount of stress. And on the flip side, for the first time since I was in junior high, I had nights and weekends off. I haven't experienced that before, because we were always in rehearsal or doing a show. And that took a lot of time to get used to. But it was also this incredible experience of having to find a way to fill that time, because I'll bet that DJ and Jeffrey are the same way. I have a feeling that we're all these kind of workhorse personalities, that we're go, 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 perfectionists. And so when you don't have that regular routine that we've all built in to lean into, instead we have to lean into a new path and pave it the whole way along. So it's a crazy experience, but one that I am determined to embrace in a positive way. So I have my checklist for the theater, all of the renovations we're doing here. And Jeffrey, we have to talk. We have
do.
To have a coffee. All that we have been through with the renovations, what an insane process. But also I have my home life of, my goodness, I'm going to make sure that I have my entire yard landscaped for the first time ever. I have time for it. I'm going to get my kitchen painted. I have pandemic, a checklist of things that I want to be able to look back on and say, I used that pandemic to the best of my ability. I took advantage of the time.
I think my dynamic went a different direction, because it's almost like with the pandemic, with everything shutting down, it's almost like it became an incubator for the idea of, because everything's a dynamic, and with everybody here, everybody with an artistic nature, your brain is constantly working and moving forward. DJ, a great example of moving to stipple and doing a different type of technique. There's always that new exploration, that new dynamic. And I think that I found myself digging deeper into that process and exploring more. What is it can we do? What are some of the other options that we can provide? How can we dig in with that process? What is it that is going to change, grow, develop, nurture as we work through this process? So whereas I don't think I necessarily had a list like you did, Dana, I think I started seeing a lot of what ifs and started to explore through those. I still had the definite drive and push, because I knew that no matter what, in spite of what was going on, we were going to get this building done. And that was always the focus, and that's always been the drive. But the path and the journey and the differentiations and the turns that it takes, I never could have conceived that it would have gone where it's gone, much less that it's taken as much time as it has. But some of that, I think, has been a blessing in disguise. I think that's really helped us to really get a better perspective and have a more holistic approach for some of the things we might have missed, that we might have run into if we were already opening, if we just stayed in that myopic lane that we might have missed. So it's one of those blessing in disguises, I think, that because it did force us to change our focus, that the dynamic opened the door to several new possibilities to work through.
Yeah, for me, the blessing is multitudinous, and by that, in times of crises, you look to a leader for guidance and assurance. And in this case, there were four such instances. The first being the 4th ISD Visual Arts Leadership Team. That entire group went out of their way to purchase each AP student their own custom art supply kit, just so they could complete their portfolio submissions remotely. The leadership at the AP College Board for graciously extending the portfolio submission deadlines. The 4th ISD Board of Trustees for ensuring that every educator was financially secure and able to serve food on their tables. And that type of security allowed people like myself to, continue their studio practice without any stress. And then you have prominent community figures like Mrs. Sasha and Edward Bass, whose generous grant relief funds allowed artisans within the industry to continue to sustain their creative spirit and practices that allowed the Forklift community to at least try and operate on some semblance of normalcy. And another positive, which we need to be truthful about, is that pandemic had some unintended positives. That March of 2020, I believe, was the first March in 18 years where a school shooting had not occurred involving students. And that is something that needs to be expressed. It's a climate that we are living in, and especially it's a hard reality for every educator. But that is something that also needs to be pointed out. Not a single school shooting in the month of March since 2002.
DJ, do you feel like it afforded you, because you and I have spoken about the time and space that the past year has also brought you. Do you feel like that afforded you like a more prolific sense in your practice? Like, were you creating more because of it?
Well, yes. When you're pushed into a corner, right, you have to find a solution. But I'm not saying that I was under any duress. Again, financial stability is there. You're professionally engaged, right? So that fear of unemployment wasn't there. So a lot of things to be grateful for. But again, from a creative standpoint, you're in this little corner now, but you have all this time and opportunity. What are you going to do with it? And thankfully, as far as my artworks are concerned, because it comes from a place deep within, a cultural a place of heritage, I think people resonate with that in a general sense. And that's something that's instinctive. When you look at a composition and it speaks to you on a psychological and emotional level, people respond to that. So I am grateful that it has garnered the attention that it has. And there's nothing more that an artist can ask for. It really isn't about the money. It's just more about getting that exposure and having people engage in discourse. And literacy is something that hopefully we can talk about. But as an educator, when we shifted to remote learning, that became a huge issue. And like I pointed out, inequities, there are policies that have been in place to curb and eradicate inequities since the United Nations Millennium Development Goals were initiated in the year 2000. But we still had inequities that still plagued not just Texan communities or American communities, but the international community as a whole. And it was quite startling to see how developed countries approached virtual learning and how developing countries approached it. And let me just say, poverty in developing countries is not the same as poverty in a developed country, especially when you talk about a nation like America, which is blessed with an abundance of resources.
Dana, you and I have also spoken. It's been a while, but I remember last time that we talked that you were pretty open about the strain, the immense strain that the pandemic has had on the theater community, this sense that there is possibly a lost generation of artists. I did want to create a little bit of space for you to talk about that, touch on that, and then what you are seeing or hearing that might give you hope for the medium.
Well, yeah, I do wonder what has happened with the theater arts community, artists in general. This field is often packed with people who are doing it because they have a passion for it. It's not something that you're going to get rich by, that's for sure. And so it has to be by passion. And so when all of these jobs essentially went away last March, whether you're a designer or an actor or a stage manager, director, most of these people are usually cobbling a living together. We are cobbling a living together, many different jobs, and all of them went away at once. So you're not getting called in for any voiceovers. You're not going out for any, directorial gigs. Everything's gone. So I assume that most of my colleagues either A, went on unemployment and are still on unemployment, or B, were forced to make their way into another industry. And for the younger set, who were just graduating, let's say, or in their first few years off in the quote unquote real world, that's a place where if you went and looked for a different industry to hire you, because theater people are an interesting lot. We're really hardworking, precise people who can do a lot of different kinds of jobs, great attention to detail. And so if those folks went and found other industry jobs, most likely those jobs pay better, probably have a greater financial stability and benefits. And there has to be that point in your life where you say, well, this was not what I trained for. It's not where my passion is, but it sure does pay the bills, and it sure will allow me to take that trip to Nepal or something whenever I want to. Eventually I can start planning. Whereas if you're the actor cobbling your living together, those things are a lot harder to do, and the pennies in the jar take a lot longer to save up for that big trip that you want to take. So I worry about who is left, who will be there when we send out those audition notices, when we can send out those audition notices. And I worry about how quickly audiences will return. I think that we can count on our base supporters. About a third of the people who come to the arts, to any given location, they're sticky there. They want to go, and so they're going to come back. But that other 2/3, those are people who are more arts curious. They're not necessarily bonded to one particular institution, and they are probably a little bit more used to, well, we're all used to being at home. Our routines have completely shifted. So yes, I continue to have that worry of, will people come back? How long will it take them to come back? And how long will it take us organizations to get our programming back to a level that has enough places of employment to employ all these people who have left the industry? I mean, that's a little bit of a ramble there, but those are the things that keep me up at night when I think about the future and where we're going. What have I found to be positive about that? Nothing yet, because we haven't gotten there yet. we haven't gotten to the point where we can put an audition notice out there and know who all is still there. So I just have to have hope and draw on that little Pollyanna part of my personality and say it's going to be okay. One way or another, theater has been around for millennia, and it will be around, well beyond this. We just have to put one foot in front of the other and figure out where we're going to. And if that means smaller programs for a while, no more no more big musicals for a little while. Okay, fine. We never did them anyway, right? They were too expensive. So if that means we need to lean into the 4 and 5 people pieces and not the 8 and 9 people pieces, then that's what we'll do for a while, and we'll find out where we go from there.
Jeffrey, I want to turn to you. I'm sure some of that is resonating for you as someone who's opening a brand new venue.
Absolutely. And I think there's some positives and things that I can share on that front, where we've been working diligently behind the scenes to really build our programming. And we are set for the rest of the year. Literally, we've got shows booked for every Friday and Saturday for the remainder of the year. Dana, you brought up some really good points and some concerns about people coming back and whether or not they'll actually come to sites to see performances. I want to give you some words of encouragement on that, as we hosted an event about 2 weeks ago, and it was sold out. So the excitement is that people are eager to come back out. They're eager to see performance. On another front, Dana, we're hiring. So if you know technicians and others, we're excited and are eager to talk with those folks. And we definitely feel like we can be a conduit for that and be able to provide additional support in that area. A lot of the entertainers that we've spoken to, and because we've had to deal with some frustrations from that standpoint, because we were scheduled to open earlier this year, and when you throw the pandemic with deliverables and then you throw in Snowmageddon on top of everything else, we find ourselves in a position where we're having to scramble and readjust. And what we've learned in talking with a lot of these entertainers, they did lose a lot from this last year. They lost all of their performance spaces from last year. And some of them even lost their representation to where they're having to take care of themselves and book themselves. But what we're finding is there's a lot of flexibility with that and a lot of patience, and are thankful to have spaces available to be able to come and perform at as the year progresses. So we've adjusted some of those dates. We continue to adjust just because that's the nature of the beast. But we've seen a lot of encouraging signs that even here in the stockyards, if I can look outside and the number of individuals that are coming back to the stockyards and coming and walking through the area, the numbers are increasing. So it's a positive from that standpoint, and there's a lot of buzz about who we're bringing and when we're opening. That I really think that right now is a really good time, Dana, that you're really going to see those people are going to start coming back. I'm very encouraged from that, especially with the number of entertainers that we're bringing through, and we are bringing theatrical performances as well. And the ones that we have that are coming through range in size from 11 to 12 performers down to one-man shows. So we're seeing a lot of versatility in what we can bring artistically to our stage, and we're seeing a lot of positive response from the community in wanting to come back out and be a part of that. So it's really, I think, a good time and a turning point is where we're at.
I'm so excited to see your space. I mean, I've known the ISIS. It's like the Barry, Barry and Hemp Hill for years. These beautiful theaters that have been closed, and I had no idea you were. I mean, I guess kind of in the back of my mind, I guess I did hear that the ISIS was being renovated and it way back, and so that's obviously you. I can't wait to see it.
Have a sneak peek behind me. I'm actually in the production booth upstairs.
Oh, really?
So you can get a little look at the stage. And one of the things that is we've been really excited about with this space, and it's very unique from the standpoint, I mean, again, historic theater, the floor is the same as it was in 1936. So it's got that same slope, and it's just rich in history. I mean, it just exudes a story when you walk through the doors, and high ceilings. So there's a lot of circulation that comes with that. And the acoustics are incredible. Really looking forward to all the different types of performers we can bring through, from music to stage performances. It really lends itself to a lot of versatility for that. And I think that's what we're thankful for.
Can we just geek out just for like 30 seconds on your facility, just to find out how many it seats and how big the stage is? It looks like it's a proscenium.
Miguel, I apologize, but I'm going to lift my camera, if that's okay, just to kind of give you a sneak peek down. if my cord will let me, and I will show you
Beautiful.
our seats.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And we are a 500-seat house. Proscenium, as you can see, that's the original size proscenium. And it's massive. I mean, it's 45 feet across, but we're able to shut it down to 30, 35 if we need to. We are doubling with a movie screen as well. So we are bringing it back because the ISIS was a movie theater. So we are still going to show movies during the day. We're going to have live entertainment in the evening, and we're sticking to classics. It's 100% classic films. We want people to come and really get that nostalgic experience. So the idea of being able to come back and see in CinemaScope a Western in the stockyard is something we're really looking forward to being able to provide as well.
Now, DJ, I want to turn to you in a
question.
second. It did. One of our viewers wanted to know where the venue is located. It's in the Stockyards, and it's at 2401 North Main Street. So in case you were curious, that is where Downtown Cowtown at the ISIS is. DJ, arts education is, a different world. But you and I have also spoken about things that you have gleaned, lessons that you have learned over the past year, good and bad. Can you go into what it has been like teaching virtually, and what have been your takeaways from that, and what do you see in your students that gives you hope?
So I'll start with the positives. Resilience, right? This is something I pointed out, and it prides me to say that when right before we were forced into remote learning, I at least had two of my art students progress to the one and only UIL event that we have in the district, and that's FACE. And one of them was able to win a medal, although albeit not the gold seal medal, but nonetheless that communication, that trust, and to that student's credit, the discipline, that was uplifting. But now that we are in a de facto hybrid learning situation right now, I still have students that can still muster and extract their imagination and, again, be disciplined in their creative line. I had one last year, but this year I had two that made it to, three that made it to state. And so that was even more uplifting. And again, a testimony to their resilience and their discipline. So I guess with virtual learning, you have to forge a special type of trust, because most of the times you're not going to see the students face to face. And so your tonal range, your instructional delivery, these are some of the things that all elective and core teachers have to master and finesse. And my heart does go out to the core teachers, especially because unlike the electives, there is constant politicization and pressure to somehow pass our students. Yes, we're living in a time of uncertainty, and it is unprecedented, but there has to be some consistency and some standard. And we also have to hold the students accountable for what they do and what they don't do. So there's an industry standard called grading with grace, something that I bemoan, because personally, coming from a third world country like Sri Lanka, countries like that do not have the technological and digital resources that developed countries have. A lot of developed countries were able to kickstart or recommence the school year last year, albeit virtual. But you have public school systems elsewhere that don't have the resources or the infrastructure to make virtual learning equitable or viable. But the point is, there's a very strong culture of education that allows them to compel students to still wear uniforms when they attend classes virtually, discipline, to set assignment deadlines, set them in stone, so consistency is still there. The concept of make-up work does not exist. And attendance recovery, what attendance recovery? You have chemistry teachers in Sri Lanka, for instance, that can manage a class of 50 students without any behavioral issues. But the most important point is those 50 students are giving the teachers the respect and attention that they deserve. They don't have laptops. They don't have wireless hotspot devices. And that's one of the great things about districts like the 4th ISD, the fact that you have districts nationwide that can afford to pay and provide laptops to every single student, that can afford to pay and provide wireless hotspot devices to students that are living in underserved or impoverished communities, and provide remote technical assistance for troubleshooting. But what's disheartening is when majority of the students don't welcome or embrace or participate in those technologies. And that's because of a national education system that is in dissonance. Here you have a country that pumps billions of dollars into the education system. And one of the positives that comes out of this exorbitant spending are social emotional learning systems. These include counseling, truancy monitoring, collegiate and scholarship workshops, even food and clothing drives. I wish when I was growing up as a South Asian expatriate student in Qatar, where I was born and raised, during the 90s, I wish I had celebrity-endorsed anti-bullying systems, because growing up was miserable. The level of racism that manifested itself through bullying was psychologically detrimental to my studies. So as a victim of school racism, yes, SELs are critical to every student's cognitive growth in order to keep up with the rigors of school. But here you have a set of coexisting systems that not only negate the SEL benefits, but they also irreparably damage the quality of instructional learning and student accountability. These systems I talk of grant students additional gratuitous time extensions on assignments, on attendance recovery, on credit recovery, and even sitting for the state board exams. I can paradoxically say that those type of systems are both a blessing and an impediment to the students, to the way students receive instructional learning and the way they learn about accountability. And there's a reason why smaller developed countries like Finland and South Korea have been ranked 1 and 2 respectively in the PISA testings that are administered by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And this is something that President Barack Obama alluded to in his 2011 State of the Union speech, where he remarked, after the parent, the greatest impact comes from the man or woman standing in front of that classroom. In South Korea, teachers are regarded as nation builders. Here in America, it's time that we started treating the people who educate our children with the same level of respect. So my feelings are mixed. The amenities are there, but not everyone is taking advantage of it. And unfortunately, not everyone is enforcing a system of consistency, of standard, of accountability. And as Jeffrey pointed out, this is the 21st century. Things have to change, and pre-COVID-19 practices should be completely wiped out. And yes, I understand we're all in a learning stage, but we talked about a generation, right? A lost generation. We do not want that to happen to our crop of youth. So there you go.
If you have questions for our guests, you can drop them in the YouTube chat. We'll get to them in a bit. Dana, there has been some pretty transformative growth going on at Stage West. Can you tell us about the renovated space that you're working on?
I can. Thank you. And I just want to say, DJ, everything you said just now, I couldn't agree with more, and I am glad that you took the opportunity to use this platform to highlight those things, because I'm often distressed by the things that we just settle into and take for granted and settle with. It's distressing. But to talk about Stage West, so we had started a campaign to renovate our building. Is 16,000 square feet, as you said in the opening. It was a bus garage for the city of Fort Worth in the 1930s. And so nice tall ceilings, but not built to house a theater. Now, we've made the best out of it, but in January of 2018, we purchased the building, took out a mortgage note, and then we started to raise money to renovate the whole thing from front to back. And we were so lucky to be able to begin phase one just before the pandemic started. And then once we realized that the pandemic wasn't going to end anytime soon, we looked at our finances and said, okay, we can continue on with finishing this. And we're actually going to finish the whole thing. It was supposed to continue through 2024. So we're extremely lucky with that. And what that means is that if you have ever walked into Stage West, when you walk into it this next time, it will look completely different. We thought about the patron experience and the artist experience as the foremost of importance for everyone, for all of the plans that we were making. So once this is done, we will have 5 different performance areas. One is the original Jerry Russell Theater. The second is a flexible space, the Evie, named after Evelyn Wheeler Swenson. We'll have the Larry and Karen Anfin Rehearsal Hall, which can also be a small performance space. It's very important for us that we act as an organization to foster tomorrow's artists. So we need spaces that are small, so that independent groups can use them. They should grow into the ISIS. They need to have a start place of a seed where you have 20 to 30 audience members so that it feels full and it's sort of an incubator of its own. Then our lobby cafe has a balcony and is a wonderful place. You could have a wedding there, but you could also have a quartet or a small performance looking down from the lobby. And then finally, we'll have the back lot, which is will be sort of like a beer garden, a small space with a stage and picnic tables, things like that. But it is a dream come true to put all of this together and to, COVID, really, the construction process is like nothing I've ever experienced. And this is the second time, or third, really, that we've been through some kind of renovation. And it's been different, but essentially overhauling this whole space. There are things that we hadn't planned for. We had hoped not to have to put a sprinkler system into the entire building. Well, we did have to do that. We had to go from 2 different address electric sources or services to 1 service, overhauling the entire electric system. It's been large, and there's things that we've encountered that we didn't expect to encounter. But overall, we've also been able to say, like Jeffrey did, let's make sure the ventilation system is overhauled so that we have a excellent quality of air for people who are coming back in to know that they can sit in our space, know that the air is turning over and filtering out, and that we have the electrostatic technology to clean all of the space thoroughly before a next group comes in. It is really exciting. And I guess the crowning touch, the last thing that we're finishing right now is the kitchen. We're going from what you could kind of think of as a glorified heat and serve kitchen. We did amazing things with it. But now it's going to be a full service kitchen with a fryer and a grill and a huge oven. So all of these things are designed to provide the community with an extraordinary opportunity to not only engage with work that Stage West is creating, but also to use the building to create work as individuals and as other smaller groups. It's my dream to see this place open 365 days a year, and maybe we'll take off some holidays and have it filled with a community coming together and experiencing and creating art of all manner.
We have a question from one of our viewers that I'm curious to hear from each of you about. Tracy Hull asks, since we were all forced to work from home and had to do many things virtually for so long, are there any aspects of our new COVID normal from an arts perspective that you think continue past COVID? Jeffrey, what do you think?
I think that there will be some. I think that there's definitely an air of caution that will stay with us for a while. I do think that being conscientious is very, very important. I know that we have COVID protocols that we've designed and put into place that we plan on sticking with for a while, just to be safe. This is something that, as we learn through the news on a regular basis, that there are continuing to be variations of the original. So we're having to stay vigilant. And so I think that there are certain things that will continue. I know that when you look at a performance space, the idea of social distancing of up to 6 feet is very difficult and very challenging. I don't necessarily see that as something continuing, because once you're in that one space, I think everybody is a collective at that point. And as long as we're taking the necessary precautions with those that are entering the facility, I think that that's something that will stay with us for a while. So I think it's really being conscientious. I think it's being cautious, and I think it's just staying safe to make sure that our patrons continue to have the best possible experience. We want it to be seamless. We don't want it to be one of those things that becomes intrusive. I don't think it's something that, because it has become such a commonplace aspect, we have been separated from, societal opportunities. I don't want it to become this significant red flag as you walk in the door. COVID, here we go, look out. Just simplifying it down so that we understand that, yes, we understand your concerns. We understand where this could be headed. We want to make sure that you're safe. We're going to make sure you've got a safe environment, and stick with your common sense with a lot of what that may be.
DJ, what about you? Considering what you had to say about virtual learning and kind of the responsibility that should be thrust upon students, is there anything that you see from this new COVID normal that we can, carry on post-recovery?
Yes. So my response to that has to tie in with the community as a whole, and more specifically the Fort Worth arts community. So, and it'll also be a partial response to Tracy's excellent question. From my perspective, I view the Fort Worth art scene like a volcano. It's active, but it's dormant. There is this explosive potential for this city to become a nationwide and even an international hub for arts, but specifically visual fine arts. And there's been few breakthroughs, sporadic breakthroughs amongst certain artists and movements that have arisen from Fort Worth. But when the pandemic struck, we can all agree that it exposed the fragility of the Fort Worth art scene, right? More specifically, the infrastructure. But thankfully, you had prominent leaders, community leaders that, again, kickstarted these grant relief funds that allowed the creative spirit to continue to flow. And that in itself did something. It was unprecedented. It was important. It allowed all of us to realize, okay, there are people that value what we do, whether it's theatrical, visual, or musical. Now, the last thing that the Fort Worth art community needs is the politicization of our creative practices. That's something that has stemmed recently. A muralist, I'd like to bring up an issue with a muralist who was put in this very unfortunate predicament, which was both asinine and unnecessary. And it's that type of political rubbish that needs to stay far, far, far away from what each of us are doing. And this new COVID requires people that have already established themselves to take us forward. For instance, in the visual arts community, we need more influential leaders like a Christopher O'Glay or an Amy Cardoso. The visual arts community needs more trailblazing leaders like a Lawrence Child or even a Dee Lara, whose ambitions to create a new gallery in Fort Worth will only revitalize healthy competition that extends beyond camaraderie. The Fort Worth the visual arts community needs more organizations like the Tarrant County Black Historical and Genealogical Society and even Artes de la Rosa that exclusively promote inclusivity, diversity, and student visual art. And finally, and this is where I guess this specifically answers your question, the visual Fort Worth community needs more art educators to start practicing and exhibiting their art on a professional level, just so we can bridge that gap between education and the art world. This community has an explosive label on it, and it hasn't exploded yet, but when it does, it's going to be an exciting time for not just each of us, Jeffrey and Dana, but for everyone involved. And so with certain leaders in place that have already established themselves, that's the way forward. You need to think about more innovative ways that address 21st century needs.
Dana, what about you? What about our new normal, so to speak, will carry on?
You know, a lot of there's basic things like cleaning more regularly. There will be masks that will be needed for a period of time. We'll probably continue to have live. We'll have live performances, but also stream them at the same time. Touchless ticketing, automatic entries at the front door. But I think that those are the nuts and bolts, and I'd like to piggyback onto what DJ was saying, that we have this opportunity to throw out the past and to reinvent our future in a manner that is more equitable and diverse and sustainable and inclusive for all, because Fort Worth, our North Texas area, is an incredibly diverse area, but we find that there are so many segregated parts of our population, and it's devastating, really, because the more that you can bring people together, the more of an interesting fabric that we are able to create as a population, as a community. And so that is something that I would like to see, as well as DJ, and I'm sure Jeffrey and Miguel and everyone who's involved here, is that we want to see tomorrow be for all of us, and not just a small percentage, and certainly not for arts for affluent white people, if I might just call it out. I come from an organization, I run an organization that benefited from white supremacy. And I don't think that any of the people that were, leading this organization were racist people who were, certainly didn't have Klan outfits in their closet, by no means. In fact, there has always been a desire and a movement through Stage West to be progressive and try to push the envelope and do better by the public and for the public. But it has to be acknowledged that there is a benefit to where we came from as an organization that was started by, white men in the 70s. And women. I better not exclude everyone, because it was sexually a diverse group. But it is important that we recognize that the arts are not just for one segment of society. It is for everyone, and everyone is welcome. Certainly that's the case for Stage West, and I feel confident that I could say the same for all of my colleagues in the arts.
One of our
if I could just tag on to the back of that, I think that both my colleagues have pointed out the key of what really needs to be addressed here, and that is arts and education and the opportunity that comes with arts and education. I think it's something that has been overlooked. I think it is something that has been marginalized, and the idea that we are able to provide a conduit for that. I mean, the statistics are clear that individuals that are gaining an arts education are statistically better performers. They're more balanced. Their intellect is more balanced. Their ability to reason, that processing that takes place, it has a direct benefit and impact on that. So it's a piece that's very near and dear to my heart, spending several years in the classroom myself, that it's very important that we are connecting to making sure that we're getting as much of the to get as much as we can of that education out there. I think that that's one of the things that we want to be able to provide as a space, is that we become a conduit for that we can connect and be that liaison between the education world and the professional community, and be able to bring more groups together to highlight more opportunities and really build, like you said, Dana, on that fabric, so that we really do get a much more well-rounded picture. The more we know, the more we grow. I know that sounds cheesy, but to have that opportunity to exist and to really, as we redesign the system, DJ, as you're saying, which I totally agree, I think we need to go back and redesign the system. Most importantly, I think one of the things that would be crucial to this, we talk about losing a generation. I think right now what's important is we talk to those kids. Let's talk to those that are in the environment now. Let's ask them directly, what is it that's going to be the best possible solution for you? Let's tap into that resource and let that help drive us into the 21st century as we try to make these changes. I think if we empower them to have that voice, we can dictate and change how that unfolds, so that we do get a better experience, a holistic experience, one that definitely has that combination, including all forms of art education.
Miguel, can I just expand on that? 2 words: education attainment. 47% of foreign-born nationals like myself that arrived in America between 2010 and 2019 attained a bachelor's degree and higher, compared to only 36% of native-born nationals. That needs to switch. And what needs to happen is a culture of education needs to reshape itself here. It simply does not exist the way it should, but considering the exorbitant money that is spent, it is for the benefit of the theater, it is the benefit of music, it is the benefit for visual arts that this changes, in order to create a society that can partake in its community and in every other facet of American society, whether it be politics or literacy. Yeah, there has to be a culture of education that needs to, that someone needs to reshape here.
Right.
What I am taking away from you all is that possibly one of the biggest silver linings of the past year is a sense of opportunity for change, for a new way to do things. So I think that is my takeaway. I want to ask our viewers, let us know what your thoughts are. We'd love to hear them. That's about all the time that we have today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to State of the Arts. I want to thank Dana, DJ, and Jeffrey for joining us today. And also thank you to the Kimball Art Museum for making this conversation possible. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to our viewers. Have a great weekend.